So good afternoon, MOCA friends. I'm Neil Gibbs, Chief of Staff at the Museum of Chinese in America. We hope you and your families are remaining safe and healthy during these challenging times. In celebration of World Health Day, MOCA Spotlight Series is honored to present as our next featured speaker, the inspiring MSNBC, NBC news anchor and journalist Rucha Lui, and author of the new book, Enough About Me, The Unexpected Power of Selflessness. At this heartbreaking moment in our country's history, MOCA as a social history museum remains committed to documenting immigrant stories, raising awareness about the long history of anti-Asian racism, and offering spaces for discussion and reflection. Please feel free to read MOCA's full statement and a list of resources in response to racism against AAPIs at www.mocanyc.org. Get involved/racism response. Please also feel free to watch a video created by MOCA charting the historic roots of anti-Asian racism in America from 1882 to now, which I will share in the chat momentarily. MOCA is also accepting your stories, letters, emails, texts, videos, recordings, reflections, conversations, photos, social media posts, art, poetry, or songs created in response to anti-AAPI violence. Feel free to email one word at mocanyc.org so we can add your stories, videos, or art to the MOCA One Word's COVID-19 special collection to be considered for an upcoming exhibition at MOCA. If you enjoy this public program, we hope you will consider making a gift to become part of a continuing lifeline for MOCA. No amount is too little, and we greatly appreciate your generosity. Your contribution helps sustain our beloved institution and supports the creation of new online programming that will bring comfort and inspiration to more communities. The program is brought to you by MOCA friends and partners, including Bloomberg Philanthropies. It is also supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Without further ado, I will let our moderator, MOCA President Nancy Yao Masbach, to introduce our guest speaker, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neil. And thank you all again for being here. I think if you are having a similar week, it's been a difficult and heavy week on back of so much of the further hate crimes that have surfaced. And we are fortunate to have Richard Lui here really trying to give us a moment of hope with his recordings and his writings around this new book that he's published. And Richard, I think for many of you, he's no stranger. He's one of the most friendly, I guess, accessible people I know who have a big, big title and big, big brand name. He is a veteran journalist, and he has hosted MOCA events on a number of occasions, always eager and willing and able, even on short notice, to help us out. And he has 30 years of experience, despite his young features, both in television, film, but also in technology and business, having made sort of a mid-career shift to his journalistic endeavors, something that one doesn't necessarily see or is not necessarily one very successful at. But we do hear a little bit about that professional path that he sought in his CNN interview that really changed the course of his career. He is actually, as we think about pioneers within the Chinese American community and the Asian American Pacific Islander community, he is in fact the first Asian American male to anchor a daily national cable news program, a winner of many awards, including an Emmy and a Peabody. And his story about priorities in his own life, more on a personal basis, do come out in this incredible book called Enough About Me. And the subtitle, which if you don't have the book yet, I really encourage you to get a copy, is The Unexpected Power of Selflessness. And we'll hear more about that in the next 40 minutes. Richard, join us, please. Thank you so much for, he's working too, multitasking. Yeah, Richard, thank you so much. Thanks for doing this. But most importantly, thank you for writing the book.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. And it's, the whole MOCA team and all the membership are so special, always have been. And so I can't thank you enough for keeping up the great work that you and Neil and the entire team that, you do every single year. I don't know how many different events and how much programming you do, but it's like, woo, man, it is a lot. And I know it's been there's been a lot of comings and goings in recent times. So thank you for welcoming me into the venue and into MOCA.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And this series, as you know, we did a couple of prep talks with Richard. This series is so important because what we're really trying to do is highlight and illuminate individuals like yourself who have taken a leadership role in different sectors, and to share your story, but also share like the rawness of who you are, so that we can really create paths and frameworks, especially for young people, but for others who might be thinking about their lives in the United States, maybe as Asian American Pacific Islanders, and perhaps some of the restraints due to the country we live in that really are manifesting those restraints more than ever before. And I guess, you know, we have wonderful images. We want to know a little bit about you before we go into the real content of your book. And you were so gracious to, you know, share some images with us, which we will now share and in some ways embarrass you with some of these early images of your youth. So what I want to show everyone is some of the images. You know,
oh, here we go.
Tell us about your parents. This is such a cute picture. And we see your father obviously so much in this book, and the book is really about his journey. But tell us about your parents.
So my pops is from Northern California. My mom's Southern California. She was sang in the church choir since she was probably a young teen. And, you know, she got to, I remember one of her stories. She said she was standing there in Southern California at church singing in the choir, and Shirley Temple Black shows up and is singing in the choir with her one day. And my mom was just like, you know, wow. But that just tells you about her. And then my dad, he went to Southern California to go to seminary and went to her church. And so I'm sure my mom looked at my dad going, what? There's a Asian American dude that's a pastor? Woo! Wee! Jackpot. And so they got together, and my mom was there, I think, for the last year of his seminary. They moved up to to Northern California, San Francisco, got married. And this is that. And you can see my dad is flat as a piece of plywood. He's always been a skinny kid.
Yeah, and we'll share your nickname for him these days later on. So both your parents are devout Christians. One's finished seminary school. They think they've both hit the jackpot, it sounds like. And it's funny that you say Northern and Southern, because at MOCA, we often, when someone says Northern and Southern, they're usually talking about Northern China and Southern China, but you're referring obviously to California. So they're both Chinese Americans here for a long time. And here's your dad playing the piano. Did they seem to have an American culture, or was it's American, it's Christian, it's Chinese? Tell us about that early years.
They tried to speak Chinese, Cantonese, to my oldest brother. I'm number 3, and he could not remember a thing because he was listening to radio. And so I asked him later on, how come they didn't try to, you know, get us educated in speaking 2 languages? And they said, look, we just couldn't do it. It was just too much. And number 1 brother's in the picture on the right, he's all the way on the left. And then number 2 brother's the one that is on the right, blowing out candles. And then I'm number 3 with the red jumper.
This one.
My dad. What's that?
You're in front of the cake?
I'm in front of the cake, yeah.
I like that outfit, Richard. You still have it?
I wear it only on Tuesdays. But yeah, that was the reason why they moved this is the home I grew up in. The reason why we moved into that one is because I was born. They couldn't live with grandma anymore. It was just too many people in the same cottage. And so my dad was born in Chinatown, San Francisco. And my mom was born in China. And very much, you know, we just had Qingming, right? That just passed. And the experience always for us as a family going to the cemetery, which, you know, I do mention in the book as sort of like we're rap stars, but in China, because we're eating and we're doing all these things, and, you know, the firecrackers are going off as well. But this is I think might be my birthday, or we might be celebrating 2 or 3 birthdays at once. I'm not sure.
I love this picture for so many reasons. As some of you have probably noticed, there's a lazy Susan on the table.
Yes.
And there are Chinese bowls or teacups, it looks like, in the cupboards. You know, you can't have a good Chinese meal without a lazy Susan. Was this used every night in your family?
It was used for every family gathering. Yes. And the china you see in the cupboard behind was only broken out for, and it wasn't like that special, but it was only broken out to be used when we had people over. And that's my grandmother's table that we took over to my house, which is still there today.
Oh, I love it so much. And then obviously this family keeps blossoming here. There are more people.
Yeah. Yes, so, that's my little sister on my mom's lap on the left. And then you can see all of us. And then, yeah, then there's the bottom right picture. I love brown sweatshirts, and was famous for not having two front teeth.
And may I ask what year your mother was born?
See, my mother is 86 now. So I guess that would put her in the 30s. Is that right?
Yep.
No, that'd be in the 40.
No, 70 years. She would have been
age at 66. Yeah, 34.
Yeah, 30, about 1934. And that's so interesting, because was she raised as a Christian? Were there missionaries in her early part of her life where she became a Christian?
I think it was my grandma took her. And my mom was the youngest daughter. So she had to do everything in the house. But yet she's the smartest and the most capable. But, you know, she was lucky enough to get an education. And I always asked her why she would stay up late at night to do everything. Like, she'd always get a lot done from around 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. I was like, Mom, why are you getting why such a night owl? And then as the years went on and she would tell me how she grew up, it's because, you know, she had to get up and make the breakfast. She then had to work at the corner store. Then she would go to class. Then she'd come back, cook dinner. And then after that, she'd work in the store. She'd close up, do all the books. Then that was her time to study. And so, but she never complained. Said, Mom, you know, that's because you were a woman, right? You know that. That was the culture. And she said, oh, well, okay, I guess you're right. What's different is that my father, he comes from 13, and none of the 9 girls got an education past high school.
Fascinating.
And only the sons.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure some of us are also recognizing that these styles have come back. I mean, you guys look like you're in vogue in this like hairstyles and sweatshirts and stuff. And, you know, your family then is growing up in California. You're going into your teen years. Your father still has this magnificent smile. And you're raised in a Christian family, in a Christian household. And tell us a little bit about your father and his occupation, because we talked a little bit about that and what his desire was and what he ended up doing full time.
It was really, I mean, look, he was a rare pastor. I think in the graduation picture from Fuller Seminary, there were like 3 or 4 Asian faces, and then 400 non. And he was definitely one of the first 20, they told me, that were of Asian descent that graduated. So the stereotype about pastors' children is that we're the opposite of what a pastor might be, because we reject it. And so I think the 4 children, we weren't like out in the street causing crime, but we were definitely the typical pastor's kids. And when my father, he couldn't support us basically being a youth pastor after he graduated with his degree. So he became a social worker, the next highest paying job outside of a youth pastor. And so we were on food stamps for some time. And thanks to the welfare system, we were able to get through some tough times.
it's so interesting. And I love the juxtaposition of the image on the left with the Chinese bowl and the plate. And then you've like now adopted the flat plate, which works horribly with rice. But the Corningware has stayed on in both images, which is impressive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I am a flat plate rice eater.
That's a whole nother compartment.
Yes.
And so your parents are continuing to, your dad doing both the social work and also still doing ministry. And are you still going to that church, and have all 4 children remained in that church?
No. No, in fact, the only 2 that were going was probably my mom and dad. And then the rest of us either stopped going to church, and then, you know, they would go on their own. And my mother was always like, you can't force them. They have to go if they can go. If they want to go, do not force them. That was tough for my dad. But he eventually gave in and accepted that's reality.
This is your graduation dinner, obviously at a Chinese restaurant. So some of the Chinese cultural components did not stray very far from the celebration. Oh, no.
Yeah, no, definitely did not. Even though we ate probably the majority of the time. That's not me, that's my brother. But most of the time we did not eat Asian food.
You? Is this not you?
No, that's my brother, Rob.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you just saying that, or?
No, I would tell you if it was me. Let me go back to that picture. Because I didn't wear stuff like that.
So we say. It's a Mickey Mouse shirt.
Yeah, that's Rob. That's Rob.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Rob.
And your dad here again, just having this. Was his personality match this incredible? You know, the how he comes alive in these images.
He loved to meet people. The thing is, he couldn't really talk to you more than about 5 minutes, and he'd run out of questions. But when he first would meet, he said, Nancy, great to see you. Oh, you know, shake hands, and, you know, so where are you from? What do you do? And then he'd run out of questions. He would just say, oh, that's great. And that was it. Where my mom could talk with you for a long time and get along with you quite well. She was very personable, but not in a very like outward, gregarious way. She was always seen as being, you know, nice but quiet. And my dad would marry just about every cousin in the family, because he was the only, I think of all the children, he was the only Christian, and also therefore would always give like during our Christmas dinners and our Chinese New Year's and everything, he'd make everybody bow their head for a prayer. And it was always weird because everybody's like, what is Stephen doing? And then sometimes he'd make us hold hands and then hug after. And you can already and then he'd have us go over to somebody else and say what they were grateful for. Can you imagine all this thing happening in a big Chinese American family? They were all like, are you crazy? Do not make us say these things. Because, you know, we don't like to express ourselves like that. But as the years went on, it was one of those funny traditions that, oh, here comes Stephen. He's going to make us hug each other again.
But then also it seems like it was absolutely convenient that he could then also marry you. So you had a little in on getting an ordained minister to marry you. Were they sometimes not even Christian?
Oh, yeah. Well, he would make them go through the proper pre-marriage Christian education. And what he would say is, and that's good, it was like, you know, it's up to you. It's your journey. And I think his 4 children taught him that, in that, you know, there are many different flavors to everything, and it's not just one, right? You don't have to be a Bible thumper, basically. Yeah, but those are my cousins.
And, you know, you mentioned in different ways, and I think people are probably wondering, you know, you mentioned 4 of you were all pastors' kids, or abbreviated PKs, and that there's a lot of heaviness around that. And sometimes you become the sort of the opposite of what your, you know, pastor parent was sort of evangelizing, if you will. And that there are episodes in the book that you mentioned that you were trying to share something about the good book with your friend. I'm just wondering, Can you share a little bit, since we are just speaking very rawly about where we are and who we are in the series? Do you profess Christian faith, or has this journey with your father, which we'll get into more specifics, made you rekindle maybe your faith? And where are you in terms of your father's desire to not only have you be a pastor one day, but, you know, I'm sure to be, to go back, you know, to be a Christian?
Yeah, you know, I am a Christian, yes. And it's not something I talk about. In fact, this book is the first time that I am discussing this topic. People have known me for years. Even 10 years, you and I know each other, and I never bring it up. And that is because as a kid, as a 12, 13-year-old, I thought I could be the world's youngest apostle. And so I was always trying to convert folks, other 12 and 13-year-olds. And, you know, it didn't work out so well. Then as I was growing through my high school years, I realized that people were saying they were, you know, oh, I go to church and I do this, and then they'd live a different way. And I got like, well, wait, these things don't fit, right? You say you're one thing, but you act one way. So then does that mean that this thing that they're saying they are isn't real? You say you're a Christian, you live a certain way. Well, then the Christianity thing must not be real, because you certainly aren't. All of you are acting in imperfect ways. And then later on, as I grew older, I saw that my parents are very imperfect people, my father included, very imperfect, and began to accept that imperfection is okay. And in fact, there still does not mean that there are great beauties in a person, despite the things that aren't so beautiful or so amazing. And so in the book, when I talk about selflessness, that's the point. Like, a lot of us grow up thinking to be selfless, you have to be like Desmond Tutu or Mother Teresa, which I bring up in the book. And the point that I try to make is, no, at the same time, you can be both selfless and selfish at the same time. So long, because that's just who we are as imperfect humans. But so long as 51% or more is selfless in what we try to do, it's good. And it just because we might be doing, like, this is a somewhat of a selfish discussion that we're having today. Like, here I am talking about myself, and look at all these pictures of me and on the other stuff, right? But I know that 51% of this is to talk about how we can think outside of ourselves, right? To consider this idea of an anti-self self-help book, right? That's what so that's why I understand that it's okay if things aren't absolutely one end or the other, right?
Richard, you know, we really appreciate that. And I know it isn't something, even society really lets people talk too much about their faith, you know, very openly, just given the, you know, predominance of judgment and many other components where people don't really seem to talk about their faith very readily. You know, we think about, you mentioned to me in our pre-discussion that your father asked you two questions when he sees you more recently. And it was, have you become a pastor, and are you married yet? So maybe if we can use that to segue into the book and the 7 years you spent with your father, really caring for him, moving away from the height of your career that you had worked so hard. For those of you who know the journey of you shifting into journalism at a very late age, I mean, can you tell us, like, how much of a risk was that for you? And can you share us that moment when you said, or you had that notion in your mind, I need to do this?
You know, so you're right. I was in business for 15 years. And then I shifted careers to become a news anchor. And it's not an easy job to get. And there's not a lot of jobs out there to get one, especially whether it's local or national. But when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you know, I did some research and I realized what the journey was going to be like, and I did not want to leave. I did not want to not be part of it, right? Because he had taken care of me. He had always, you know, for instance, when I was a little kid and I was getting bullied as a little Asian kid, you know, I remember he came to my bed before I went to bed, and, you know, was tucking me in. He was like, well, Richard, this is when I was in elementary school. Richard, you know, you can either defend yourself or you can let it keep on happening. And so he said, I don't know. And then he came back the next day and he said, did you make up a decision? And I said, well, I think I'd like to see how I can defend myself. And he says, okay, well, I think I have a solution. There is a Shaolin monk who I know through a person at church who can teach you Kung Fu. And you can probably bet what I was thinking, Nancy, when I heard that. I was like, I'm already being called the Kung Fu kid, and now you're going to get Kung Fu lessons. This is because Bruce Lee was out there, and he was certainly a force, a cultural force to be reckoned with. So I said yes, and it worked, because as soon as I would break out any sort of Kung Fu move in the schoolyard, people were like, oh, little Bruce Lee, little Bruce Lee. But yeah, so he did that throughout my life. And like when I needed, so I didn't go to college out of high school. I worked at Mrs. Fields Cookies and fast food for 4 years. And when I wanted to go back to college, I said, I don't have the money. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll pay off the debts that you got so you can go back to school. So was I going to help him now as he was going to start this battle, right, with Alzheimer's? And I knew it didn't matter how many siblings were in the Bay Area or not. I wanted to be part of helping him live okay. And same with my mother. And that was the beginning of this idea for the book. I just didn't know it.
And this is some of the time that you spent with him, and you saw that he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and there would be, I guess, pressure to see how much longer he would have to remember aspects of his own life. And it's what's interesting. I really had a question for you, because you allude to it in different parts of the book about your Chineseness infused with a very strong devout Christianity. And there are scholars out there. There's one at Yale, Chloe Starr, that talks a lot about contemporary Chinese Christian faith, and how sometimes, in ways that, texts do not stand independent and untouched by the historical and cultural context in which they are written. So the idea that the Chineseness of your faith has an impact and evolves in it. So this Kung Fu-ness, or you mentioned in some of the services where there's a Chinese component, and it might be a funeral, it might be some other condition, but you didn't necessarily, your family did not participate in all of the cultural realms of that. How did your father, as such a devout Christian and a pastor, and your mother for that matter, exemplify that to both, present their Chineseness to you, and yet this strong faith?
So one of the defining moments was certainly when, by the way, this picture here is of me taking him for walks, and you can see he's gained some poundage. He's about 240 here, and his entire life he was about 150. So this is what the Alzheimer's would make you forget that you had eaten. So he would keep on eating and eating and eating, and we're going on his daily trip to go to Subway Sandwich on the right to get his tuna sandwich, 6-incher, and then after that we go to buy a donut. And these are the times, Nancy, you talked about how he would lean in and say, Richard, are you married yet? And then he'd lean in and he'd go, Richard, would you like to become a pastor? And this walk on the left is exactly the times, like he could be talking about all sorts of things, and all of a sudden he'll stop and go, Richard, are you married yet? So that's the context that you have on that picture on the left, since we were talking about it earlier. But one of the defining moments certainly was when my grandmother passed away. And there were the rituals that, were brought in that were done typically. The burning of money, the bowing, the firecrackers, the food, the typical sort of experience at Qingming, which we were talking about earlier as well, which were weird for us being church folk. And so I remember looking over, and I was, quite young, I was in my teens, and I was like, do we do this? This is weird. What are we bowing? We don't even bow at church. What are you talking about? We only bow when we pray. And now we're bowing 3 times at a tombstone, and we we got to do this big deep bow. It's not like, you're bowing your head. It's like the serious like movements. And you were holding incense at the same time. And like, do we do that? And then they had to kind of look at each other, my parents, and go, no, you don't have to do it, but your dad will. And I was like, that's a little weird. And I think those kind of moments were especially introspective for them, because they knew what their faith was, but they also knew they had this heritage. And it was, first time my father was losing a parent, where he had already become an ordained minister. And certainly my mother, it was the first time she had to show her children what all of these things meant at the same time. I thought that was very, very interesting. The cemetery, not new to folks probably on this call, is a place where a lot of things come together culturally. And it was actually, that's the time where I learned my last name was not Louis.
Right. So tell us about that. Some of you, I think most of you in the call are familiar with Paper Sons and the 1906 earthquake and the sale of papers, false papers, for people to come in undocumented under a false name. So what is your real name? Who are you? And and why are you here? But just, yeah, can you share a little bit about how that story manifested itself in your family and the moment you realized that you're not Richard Louis?
So the tombstone, Nancy, said WONG. And I was just like, I know we're cheap, but we didn't get a used tombstone, did we, for grandma? And I was like, WNG, we're LUI. And my dad didn't know. This was the same time when my grandmother passed. He walks over to his oldest sister, because he's number 8, over his oldest sister, and says, hey, what happened? And that's when he learned. He was in his 40s when he learned that. And I just heard that. I was like, well, why do we have, so do we change our name? And, the decision was not to. But then when I was at CNN, and I'd just done a segment on immigration. And we went to break, and I sat there for a moment. I was like, wait, this illegal immigration thing, this is me. This is me. But it was during a break, after doing a segment on CNN as an anchor about immigration. And so, yeah, I am here because my grandfather, since you asked me why I'm here, because my grandfather didn't want me to be a poor Chinese farmer, bottom line. And so even though I've never met this grandfather that bought the name, I often will say when I'm giving messages that, thank you, Grandpa, for coming here. Thank you. Because I am not a Chinese farmer. I'm a national news anchor. And it's only in this great country where that can happen, where a grandson of an unauthorized immigrant is now able to work here as I sit at 30 Rockefeller Center as a news anchor. And that's the power, I think, of remembering stories like that, because it makes America different, unlike any other country. And to be Chinese American, really, really quite something else.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That's, those are the stories that MOCA really collects and tries to make sure that we don't lose to the generations. So I was so excited, and I didn't really know all the full details of your family's journey as a paper son and how that was discovered. And, I do, sharing with those who are on the call, MOCA is working on a Center for Research and Genealogy. So it will be the first one, and names like yours will be then collected also as actually Wong. And as many people know that you could, in different ways, get your name back if you served in the armed services or
right.
in other circumstances. But that's fascinating how you found out. And also that your father didn't know it until that moment.
No, he didn't.
Which is incredible.
And that's why I say, Nancy, I have the Wong name.
that's almost a bad joke, but also,
no, my name is Wong, though.
I know, I know. And Abercrombie would not be able to pull that one off.
No.
You talk about the current situation around meism, and then also I think I don't think I'm alone in looking at these beautiful images with you and your father, and thinking about the disgusting, audacious acts of crime against especially AAPI seniors. And I'm sure it came so alive to you when you heard these stories of just the incredible hate that was manifested in these as attacks on random, people. And if you're like me, and you more in particular, you've been spending this, your days just caring for your father and your mother. Can you tell us a little bit, as also a journalist who's covering this, and where are you in this space, and what is the voice that you have right now around this topic?
I am angry. I am frustrated. I am horrified. I am energized. I am boosted. I am excited at what's in front of us. And my father, during this period that you see in the picture, is the time he was pushed to the ground as well. I wrote an op-ed in the San Francisco Chronicle about 2 weeks ago about how he was pushed to the ground too. And he was pushed to the ground in a different anti-Asian wave of hate. And it was about 5 years ago. For those of you in Northern California will remember that. And he, because of his dementia and Alzheimer's, didn't know what was happening. So we got a call from the hospital, and they say, your father was pushed to the ground. The store called 911. Your dad doesn't know what happened and doesn't know why it happened, only that the man ran away. And I didn't say anything about it. I didn't think to. And I'm a journalist. I'm supposed to talk about stories that are not being talked about. And so I understand our community's difficulty, I think, historically, of sharing and being vocal about even the smallest of things, and that it's important to do so. I think that our Asian American community, and it's not a fault, it's just who we are, we don't necessarily prize being vocal. And we are in a society writ large that values being vocal. And so you have this conflict of what it might mean. I am just very gratified that we have 1,700 members of the Asian American Journalists Association that in every corner of our country, both nationally and locally, have been able to talk about the stories in ways that they uniquely can express the reality that that is our Asian America. And that has been so gratifying to see. When Vincent Chin was killed in 1982, there were but maybe 50 members of the Asian American Journalists Association. And as you know, there were 3 significant journalists of Asian descent that documented that it actually happened, that he was beaten in front of that McDonald's to death, that his head could not be recognized in autopsy photos, which when I saw them, it taught me I would have to tell the story on his 25th and his 30th anniversary of his killing to America for CNN. And I knew I needed to tell it. That's why I went to his gravesite. That's where I went to where he was killed. That's why I went to the bar that started that entire incident. Corky Lee and Tihua Chang and Helen Zia, and I know I'm repeating this to a group that knows these folks well, if it weren't for those journalists saying, I'm going to do something that is above and beyond my career to go to Detroit to get this on the record books so that we don't forget. And we didn't have a lot of marches, as you know, across the country. We had a handful maybe. And so when we see 1,700 journalists today that are members of the Asian American Journalists Association, this is really one of those times that we now have had another call, and we now must answer that call. And this is why in that op-ed, and I've written in several op-eds, now's the time that we all will join in a movement. We will step forward, we will stand up, we will ask, we will march on the mall, we will ask for a Smithsonian museum. We will not take a wing, we will take a building. All of these ideas that we will give the historical sites of those of those who came from other countries from Asia that have given so much to our country. We will make them historical sites. So when I see this horrific phenomenon against people who are, by all means, some of the weakest physically, and that we are seeing the underlining of a perception that this community is a punching bag, will not punch back, that is subhuman and therefore deserve to be treated not like humans, that is not the case, that we are not perennial, not from here, that we instead are here and have given, and we need to have the affectations, we must have the tent poles that all other groups have fought for, and we will learn from them, and through allyship, we will get there. So Nancy, I guess to answer your question, I don't have many thoughts on the topic.
No, it's so good to hear you, and especially from the journalistic lens. I think that's, where a lot of people we talk to are feeling helpless, they're feeling charged, they're feeling angry, a lot of that, but like giving that specific path as far as how we can continue to stand up to it. And, I know you were going to really give us the pleasure of having you read from the book. And if folks have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'll sum them up and hand them over to Richard. Before you go into the reading, and maybe right after this question, you can go immediately into a reading from the book, it is published by Zondervan. And Zondervan is a Christian publication house. And I wonder, just going through the book, and knowing your father's question to you in this left-hand picture, is this your sermon for your father?
You know what it is? It certainly is what he would want me to write. And I think he tricked me. He may be fine. He may have done all of this.
This is how is he going to make you get a wife? That's this.
He's working on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is certainly, I think, he'd always been proud of the fact that I was, doing news and that I could tell stories. And I think this fits into that too. But I don't, the messaging in it is not, it has many layers to it. And you've read it to understand, Nancy, it's not just about any one thing. It's about a lot of different flavors. And I think as we go through this time of a misconception of what being Asian American is that I'm glad that I shared the stories of what it was like to grow up Asian American in the book, because I think it breaks the misconceptions, it breaks the myths, it breaks the stereotypes, it breaks, as you know, the topic that is dividing America in many ways, this idea of model minority myth. And that was not the purpose when we wrote it. It was to talk about the idea of, in small ways, in bite-sized ways, how can we help other people and be thoughtful of other people? And so that, I think, it covers a lot of things, but I think especially since we're going through what we're going through, is the important thing that we share I know you believe this because you run a museum, and those at the museum know this, you have to share the stories that, we may have come here at one year, but you also have to remember who we are today.
Wonderful. Yeah, please read to us.
What do you want me to read?
We know there's some poetry in the back, but is there a moment between you and your father, or an experience that you had that was, or some space that really helps define the power of selflessness that you feel really encapsulates the purpose of your book?
I'll read this. So I've never read anything from the book. And this is, so there are 4 poems in the back, and I did collaborations with poets because I ain't no poet, but I like to think I wanted to be one. So, I've cribbed throughout time. And so Annalicia Sotelo and myself, we write this in the first it's about the first chapter, which is halftime, which is basically to mean, the reason why the first chapter is halftime is I ain't no expert in this. I'm just a reporter that's looking at an opportunity to evaluate what the next half will be and how the next half can be done better. And certainly, I wrote this also as a reminder to myself what not to forget. There's a lot of times I remember a certain chapter when I'm doing something and say, oh, you goofed up, Richard. Don't forget, don't forget to use 10 stones to make good decisions, for instance. So this one is reading by the window. And so I'll read it. And again, I've never read this out loud, but here we go. Reading by the window. I read him the news. I couldn't tell which year it was. We felt the worst or the most, or both. Nor could Dad remember which year was the year. I decided on bolognese and turnip soup for dinner. We're all a little mixed up. At the table, our opinions dance at the sight of blooms with no way of knowing if these are our new centerpieces, and if so, how we made them happen. Did we do it together through sheer concentration, like a window left open to the air and the elements and whatever else might happen today, which could be tomorrow or even yesterday? And the reason when we wrote this was because my father used to love to read by the window. And that was one of his favorite things to do when he would do his morning devotion or reading his books. Reading by the windows were always the time for him to reflect. And so what in this poem, the reason why, you know, when I put in certain things along with Annalicia, it was to describe not only his journey of not knowing even what year it is and how it became that way, and how he used to love to read the news by the window as well. And you can, the part where I said I decided on bolognese and turnip soup for dinner is because I actually did cook that for him, because when I would travel back, I would make different, I'm no cook here, Nancy, but I would try to help them eat better because my mom was so busy caregiving and my dad obviously couldn't cook. But that bolognese and turnip soup for dinner really showed you that sort of mixed up existence at the same time. And as I move on in the poem and I say, at the table, our opinions dance at the sight of blooms. You know, the blooms are about, despite the difficulty, there is joy and there's laughter. And throughout, like the book, the reason why, you know, there's some jokes here and there is because, you know, it's not all, you know, tough stuff. There's a lot of new stuff that's really, you can laugh at. And you laugh harder, you also cry harder. And that's why, again, I write at the table, our opinions dance, because we like to argue in my family, but they also dance at the sight of blooms, the new things that we're learning, the new things why we're learning. And the second part of that, Nancy, where it says with no way of knowing, because we actually don't even know. Like we're open to the uncertainty. So that the poems in the back were because I know that when we talk about topics like this, you can't just shake fingers. And that this book is not a shaking finger, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen it. It really is more of, hey, let's hang out together. Let's laugh a little bit. Let's cry a little bit. Let's read a couple poems together. And, you know, I even, because I'm such a business person, the way I approach things, I don't know if you saw, there's a place called Our Or Playbooks. And the reason why they're or playbooks is because it's objective, action, and result. And then there's these sort of playbooks. Like if you cut them out, you can remember the little things to do. So basically distilling all the ideas into just like little cards, because there's so many ideas throughout the book. And I figured we needed to put it together in one place.
That's great. And for those of you, don't have the book yet, I really encourage you and encourage you really to support your local bookstores. They really need your help. Amazon, I think, has been doing pretty well. We have it in the chat as well, bookshop.org, Get Enough About Me. And just to let everyone know that all of the net proceeds, Richard is donating to Alzheimer's care and research and advocacy and AAPI and hate issues. And what's really exciting is the World Selfless Day campaigns. I wanted, a lot of folks, and we'll give you the notes to this, they're also sharing that they are paper sons or children or grandchildren of paper sons and paper daughters. One question that we also had here is, how did your early struggles, you mentioned you had to food stamps, your parents, were obviously doing things that had a different type of intrinsic value, but not extrinsic values. How did that form who you are today, and maybe this whole, space that you're in now? And then also if you can touch on what is gratitude within the concept of selflessness. Is this gratitude to your father and your mother and their upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, the second to last chapter is called Gratitude, and it's the sort of like the big cousin to selflessness, and it can be very practical. For instance, if a leader in your organization, it's shown that, and there's many studies that we had a scientist as well as an assistant researcher that were part of the team of 10 people to help put this book together, and it's shown that if a leader expresses gratitude in effective ways, that productivity goes up 50%. Gratitude, if we write gratitude letters to a person, whether it's somebody at work or in your family, like if you were to write one, Nancy, to somebody in your organization to thank them for their commitment to what MOCA is, that the cortisol levels drop, the dopamine levels go up, oxytocin goes up, and it stays up for about a month. For not only the person you're giving gratitude towards when you write this letter and then you read it to them, also goes up for you too. And so gratitude isn't that important, vulnerable, productive expression of selflessness. And sometimes we forget that. We focus on gratitude in that 17th chapter because we know that as you look at the arc of what selflessness might be throughout the book, that then gratitude is a natural follow-on.
I appreciate that. That's really, I can see it has a domino effect. You've done such an amazing job bridging these tough conversations with your parents, through your whole life. Someone's wondering if you have advice. Are some stories meant to be unspoken, and are others, do you have any advice on how to tackle some of those really tricky conversations?
I think there's a couple things. One is use video. So look for videos that express the topic you want to talk about, that are either fiction or nonfiction. And so maybe there's a movie that expresses this idea. And if it's not in language, then that would be difficult. But if there's an in-language opportunity to do that, I think is very effective. So one of the things that is used often are also these, so that's the way it started for me, is I was doing a video for ARP on what it's like to look like me and talk with your parents about issues of death and caregiving, along with 2 other folks. And so with Daphne Kwok leading that, we created, several videos. And so one way is to show those videos potentially to whoever's asking that question. Thank you, anonymous attendee at 550 for that. And there's also a prepare to care guide that is in language as well. So you can break that out, sit down with them and talk to them through some of the tough decisions. But the video is the best because it's not you preaching at them, and it's a video that's showing them instead. Hey, Nancy, I can't hear you.
I'm bringing back up this photo because we had a question from Helen. Can you share us what's going on in here? Your father and you're communicating through a device. What's going on here?
So if you've got, so the way, at least for this Alzheimer's, for my dad living with Alzheimer's, he hearing voices was very essential to him. The 2 things that work really well was voice and touch. So I would put my hand on my father's forehead, I would hold his hand, and he would react quite well and remember us, basically. And so this case, I'm saying hello to him, and it's a magnifier that amplifies my voice. And I would hold up the sign so we'd get all the cues visually as well as audibly, and then he could see me at the same time. And one of the things that we figured out that would help have him allowed to hear us and remember us was, we started to read chapters of the Bible to him, because it's something he studied a long time. It's also a way for us to talk longer to him so that he didn't just hear, hello, how are you? Right? Because that's so short. So we decided to find texts that were strong to his memory. And certainly the Bible is very strong to him because he studied it for so long. So whatever text or books that maybe your loved one might have read or loved, you know, try reading that into this this amplifier, excuse me. And at one point, I actually said, Baba, if you can hear me, blink once, and paused, and then he blinked once, like a long 1.5 second blink. And I was like, wow. So then I took my phone out and I started recording, and I said, Baba, if you can hear me, this is Richard, your son. And if you understand me, blink once. And he blinked once again. And remember, he can't talk. And I tell you, woo-wee, that was crazy. But boy, it was also so gratifying.
And, you know, this is so incredible, Richard. You know, you've really given us so much hope and also knowledge and some place to go to get some rules of the road in terms of how we might be able to make change in the world. I feel like that's really what I see in the OR playbooks. Just something I was caught off guard because was that Humphrey Bogart on your phone? What were you showing your father? Was that a pastor or was it Humphrey Bogart?
It was probably Humphrey Bogart, but it probably was Bing Crosby because he loves White Christmas.
Got it. Okay.
So I would play that for him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the big question to end with, and I'm so curious, you spend a lot of time out of your professional career. You're obviously someone who thinks carefully about business, you know, return on investment, return on time. Where are you now in terms of its looking back at that time you spent?
I am very grateful for the opportunities, and I did not think I would have today. What is it today? Friday, April 9th, 2021. Think that I would have written a book, and I am very grateful that I could have gone through the process, and I've learned a lot about myself, nor do I think you and I would be talking about all the things we have today. It was really crazy. I mean, I'm just like, I can't believe these are the things that I'm doing today. But it certainly was because of the decision I made to help my father that brought me down the road of this book. And then before that, doing a movie that's coming out in May on student caregivers, which is going to broadcast on several networks. You know, all these things if you talk to me like that moment you saw me walking with my father, so who knows?
I wanted to say that we're really grateful that you wrote this book. You know, it is quite revolutionary in some ways, but so obvious in others. And, you know, thank you so much for sharing, you know, your journey, especially with us, just given so many elements of the Chinese American journey. You've just put together so many different aspects, and we've hardly gotten into it as far as Paper Son, multiple generations, your first generation, West Coast, East Coast, caring for elders. And, you know, we didn't even say the word filial piety in any of this, which is bizarre. But thank you so much. Really, again, encourage everyone. This has been recorded. We'll send it on. But most importantly, please go to your local bookshop online or in the flesh and get the book, Enough About Me by Richard Louis. Promise you that you will have definitely a different change thoughts in all of this. And it's really so well done. And it gives us practical ways in which we can consider making changes in our life to make a change in the world. So Richard, final thoughts?
Nancy, just thank you so much for doing this. And if anybody picks up the book or has picked it up, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And you know, we make a conscious decision about every 15 minutes. And if any of you consider reconsidering how that decision might be made in a selfless way, then I think the purpose of the book has been accomplished, because that's what it is. It's just one decision that might be thought, thinking of somebody else with a selfless notion.
Richard Louie, anchor, journalist, author of Enough About Me. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll see you soon, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you at the next MOCA event.
Thank you, Nancy. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Neil.